السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Before starting, firstly, I humbly request that you make dua for Hazrat Mufti Ibrahim Desai, Hafidhullah. He's on the ventilator at the moment. When I asked about 2 hours back on his condition, they just sent a message and said critical. So please make dua for him that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him complete shifa. Definitely we still need to benefit from him much more. We haven't taken enough benefit from him. You know, when they talk about benefiting from ulama in the past, you should notice the actions and benefit from the akhlaq. To benefit from the akhlaq of Mufti Ibrahim Desai, besides his ulum, the personality, his character, and things like that. It's just so much. In fact, I was just thinking that you can actually give a full 1 hour beyond just on his character, the way he wins over people, and that charisma which he has, and how he meets with people, etc. Nevertheless, to continue, ابن حجر رحمه الله says أو إن كانت المخالفة بتغيير حرف أو حروف مع بقاء صورة الخط في السياق، فإن كان ذلك بالنسبة إلى النقط فالمصحف، وإن كان بالنسبة إلى الشكل فالمحرف. ومعرفة هذا النوع مهمة، وقد صنف فيه العسكري والدارقطني وغيرهما، وأكثر ما يقع في المتون وقد يقع في الأسماء التي في الأسانيد. ولا يجوز تعمد تغيير صورة المتن مطلقة، ولا الاختصار منه بالنقص، ولا إبدال اللفظ المرادف باللفظ المرادف له إلا لعالم بمدلولات الألفاظ وبما يحيل المعاني على الصحيح في المسألتين. Ibn Hajar rahmallah moves on to discuss yet another method in which mukhalafa takes place. This is when a person makes a mistake because of seeing or hearing a letter incorrectly, or maybe when he heard it, it was mispronounced, or maybe there is a change in the i'rab, in the critical marks, or maybe a change in the letter itself. So he says, أو إن كانت المخالفة بتغيير حرف, that if there is a difference because of the change of one letter. So بسبب التلفظ بتغيير حرف. So one letter is changed in the way it is pronounced. أو حروف, or maybe many letters of one word are changed. مع بقاء صورة الخط في السياق, but the way it's written is still the same. فإن كان ذلك بالنسبة إلى النقط في المصحف. In some نسخة it comes with the مربوطة إلى النقطة. So in some of the manuscripts. So it is basically a merely change of dots. Then it will be known as Muṣahhaf. So when you talk of changing dots, you have a bar. There's one dot in the bottom. But now if you read manuscripts, you know in those times they would dip in the ink and then they would write. So sometimes maybe a drop of ink must have fallen, or maybe at times when they used to write in the past, they weren't very careful to put the dots. So a person might read the letter as a ba, but another person might read it with an additional dot, which is a ya. Or maybe someone will read a letter as a ya, which has 2 dots, and another will take out 1 dot and read it as a ba. So like that, a ra and a za, you can, there's just a difference of 1 dot, a dal and a dal. A sin and sheen also is just a difference between the dots, ain, ghain. So there are so many Arabic letters where the only difference is a dot, a swad and a dhad. So because many scribes would not care to dot the letters, that would cause narrators to err. So if the confusion is just because of dots, then it is called Muṣahhaf. This word Muṣahhaf, Mullah al-Qari says that it's the ism maf'ul min at-tashif. It's the ism maf'ul of the word at-tashif. To go through the linguistic meaning, Sheikh Qudair says that al-Muṣahhaf ta'rifu lughatan ism maf'ul min at-tashif, wa huwa fil asli تغيير اللفظ حتى يتغير المعنى. So the meaning is that it means in English you can translate it as to distort. So it's very similar. The technical meaning and the linguistic meaning is very similar. Now here the text talks about just merely changing dots, but even if there was a mistake in making out the letter, then too it will fall under this category. So if you go through makhtutat, you will see that the way they used to write the ta marbuta at the end, many times it would be confused with a dal, like that. So it's a completely different letter. It's not just a matter of dots. It's a complete change in the letter, but because of the way they would write it. So that too would fall under this category. Mullah al-Qari says, ثم تغيير الحروف إما حقيقة كما في تغيير النقط أو مجازا كما في تغيير الشكل. So he's saying that sometimes it's حقيقة, it's only merely a change of one dot, but at times it's the way the letter is written that they would confuse one letter for another letter. So in short, the letters are in the same order, but the person just got confused. And you'll understand this here from the examples. Allama Munawi rahmallah gives the example of Awam ibn Muwajim. So you can see Muwajim, that's a waw and a jim. So when we explain now that sometimes the whole letter is changed, it's not just a matter of a dot. It's actually Muṣahhaf. So the waw has been converted into a za, and then the jim is converted into a ha. So differences like that. You see later Mullah al-Qari rahmallah mentions a book. The author there, he mentioned so many examples. Allama Askari rahmallah, he said, وَشَرَحْتُ بَعْدَهَا مِنْ أَسْمَاءِ الصَّحَابَ وَالتَّابِعِينَ وَمَنْ يَتْلُوهُمْ مِنَ الرُّوَاةِ وَالنَّاقِلِينَ جُلَّ مَا يَقَعُ فِيهِ التَّصْحِيفُ. So now he gives examples. مثل حباب وحتات. So if there's no dots, if you write it on a page, ha, ba, alif, ba, but you don't put dots. Now, do you put a dot in the bottom and read it as a ba, or do you put two dots on top and read it as hattat? Or do you read it as a khabbab? Or do you read it as janab? Or do you read it as hayyan? So you can see it's all written the same, but how many different words? If you don't put the dots, it could either be habab, hattat, khabbab, jannat, hayyan, hibban. So many different ways the same name can be read just because of confusing the dots. Likewise, Habib and Khubayb, or Haritha and Jariya, or Bishr and Busr, Abbas and Ayyash, Hamza and Jamara, Hazim and Khazim. So these kind of examples, just because of a dot, Rabah and Riyah, etc. So these are examples which Mullah al-Qari rahmallah gave of names in the chain. Now we mentioned that this year it's because of the way it was written. So there's two ways that a person would get confused. One is because of being written, so he's reading it. Mullah al-Qari explains that وَجَعَلَ صَاحِبُ الْخُلَاسَةِ الْمُصَحَّفِ أَقْسَامًا مِنْهَا مَا يَكُونُ مَحْسُوسًا بِالْبَصَرِ. There are those which is because of your eyes. So the reader, he will either read it. So this here is how majority of the times it would take place. ويشتبه الخط على بصر القارئ إما لرداءة أو لضعف البصر. Either the words were not written correctly, or either the person did not see it correctly. So that was one way. But the other way is also that they would hear it incorrectly. ومنها ما يكون مخصوصا بالسمع. That تصحيف السمع ومنشأ رداءة السمع أو بعد السمع ونحو ذلك. In those times they didn't have microphones, etc. So maybe the person, he either could not hear properly, they didn't even have hearing aids, or maybe he was sitting so far away. فيشتبه عليه بعض الكلمات لكونها على وزن صرفي أو واحد. So that is the one type. And now Ibn Hajar mentions another type. وإن كان بالنسبة إلى الشكل فالمحرف. That if there is a difference because of shakl. What's the meaning of shakl? أي الحركات والسكنات. That the i'rabs, that the critical marks are put differently, then it will be considered as muharraf. The word muharraf, again, yeah, you can use the lugwi meaning. It's تغيير الكلمة عن معناها. So, you know, in the Quran, يحرفون الكلمة عن مواضعه. Verse 13 of Surah Ma'idah, يحرفون الكلمة من بعد مواضعه. So the word tahrif, it means to distort. So here, it's the way Ibn Hajar is explaining it, it means distorting it because of i'rabs. So, like in Yawaqit wa Durar, the example is given, كتحريف Salim بسليم. So, if you have to write Salim and Sulaim, it's written exactly the same. There is no additional dots. There is no differences in the dot, but you are reading it differently. So, in this way, yeah, the example which Mullah al-Qari rahmallah gives is Rumiya Ubayyun Yawm al-Ahzab. So you can see Ubay. Gundar, when he read it, he said that Abi. So he didn't read it as Ubay. So again, the word, it's Alif ba Ya. Now, it's just a matter of the Arabs being different. But now here there is an objection that how exactly do you understand this here from Nukhbatul Fikr? Because you know, Ibn Hajar rahmallah first wrote Nukhbatul Fikr, which is the matan, which is the text. And then he's wrote Nuzha an-Naḍar to explain the text. So obviously, what he's writing in when he was writing Nukhbatul Fikr, he didn't know he's going to write a commentary. So it should have been such that a person who read that initial text, he could get an idea exactly what Ibn Hajar was intending. But when you go here to the original text of Nukhbatul Fikr, it's أو بتغيير حروف مع بقاء السياق فالمصحف والمحرف. So how do you understand from the text that there is a difference, number one, and number two, Muharraf refers to a change in the critical marks, a change in Arabs, and Muṣahhaf is the one which is specified to the change in a dot. So basically, if you are reading only Nukhbah, you wouldn't have understand that Muharraf is different from Muṣahhaf. Mullah al-Qari rahmallah gave the answer. He explained firstly this اعتراض ويخرج من الشرح نظره في المتن لأن صريح الشرح أن المحذوف ما وقع التغيير فيه بالنسبة إلى حركة الحروف. So the answer which is given is that Nukhbah spoke of it as a broad chapter. That this chapter here, when you're having, it mentioned that broad chapter, and it just mentioned one specified type from this chapter. As you get this chapter of Muṣahhaf and Muharraf, and under this chapter you get where they change a dot. So that's how Ibn Hajar rahmallah explained it in the original text, and later on he decided to elaborate. That's the one answer you can give. But the second answer you can give is that Muṣahhaf, Ibn Hajar rahmallah is dedicating his own meanings. Scholars before him did not use it in this way. So when he wrote Nukhbatul Fikr, he followed how scholars before him, they would not create any distinction. And when he wrote Nuzha an-Naḍar few years later, then he decided now to create a distinction in the usage. So the simple meaning, if you go to the footnotes, you see فالمصحف هو ما غير فيه النقط والمحرف ما غير فيه الشكل مع بقاء الحروف. That's a simple meaning. Now that you understood that Muṣahhaf refers to the changing of a ra to a za, etc., just mere changing of dots, and Muharraf refers to the changing of Arab, you can read the next point which Shaykh Nuruddin writes there. وَيُطْلَقُ الْمُصَحَّف وَالتَّصْحِيف عَلَى مَا يَشْمَلُ الْأَمْرَيْنِ فَتَنَبَّهْ. That sometimes Muṣahhaf and Muharraf, Muṣahhaf is used interchangeably with the word Muharraf. In fact, like we said, that Ibn Hajar is the first one to make this distinction. وَابْنُ الصَّلَاحِ وَغَيْرُهُ سَمَّ الْقِسْمَيْنِ مُحَرَّفًا وَلَا مُشَاحَةَ فِي الْإِصْطِلَاحِ وَالْفَرْقُ أَدَقُّ عِنْدَ أَرْبَابِ الْفَلَاحِ. So Ibn Hajar is the one who is making this. When you go to books of earlier scholars, if there's a change in Arab, they would call it tasheef. They wouldn't create any distinction. They would not call it tahrif. So they used it 100% interchangeably. Like we said, it's whether it was an istilah or whether they were just using the linguistic meaning of the word. Obviously, they're talking Arabic. So they use the dedicated word, the allocated word in Arabic. Like if they were talking English, they would say that there's distortion here. So it does not mean that the word distort is an istilah. It's an official meaning. So scholars before, they would just use the word tahrif and tasheef. They weren't, like you see, Ibn Hajar rahmallah is going to mention about Alama Askari's book. in that book, he used the word tahrif when a word is totally distorted. So he wrote that book, but if you go through the book, you'll see that a word is completely distorted. So probably Ibn Hajar rahmallah, he decided to become very particular about it, and maybe he saw earlier scholars sometimes using the word tahrif. For example, in Kifaya, there is a statement of Awza'i rahmallah that لا بأس بإصلاح الخطأ واللحن والتحريف في الحديث. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah felt that it would be wise to make a distinction. But taking it a step further, not only did they not dedicate the word or not create any distinction between tashif and tahrif, they even used the word tashif in a much broader sense. So it incorporates all types of errors that even at times when there was no changes at all, then they would also use the word sahhafa. So Sheikh Ibrahim al-Lahim in his commentary, he says, والذي رأيته من استعمال الأئمة للتصحيف التوسع فيه أكثر من هذا كله فكل ما كان خطأ في كلمة أو جملة فهو تصحيف. When there was a mere mistake, they would consider it as تصحيف. وقد لا يكون تصحيف أصلا. At times there would be no تصحيف according to this the kind of definition. And then he gives an example. So we go directly to the source of Suwalat ibn Junayd. He says, Ibn Junayd says that I asked Yahya ibn Ma'in with regards that حدث عبد الوارث عن أبي الجلاس عقبة بن سيار عن علي بن الشماخ قال سمعت مروان يسأل أبا هريرة عن الصلاة عن الميت والشعبة يقول عن الجلاس عن عثمان بن الشماس. So you can see Uthman and Ali, what a big difference. So Yahya said that Shu'ba yusahhifu fihi. That Shu'ba is the one making a mistake. So they use the word yusahhif in the meaning of making a mistake. So it was not just to do what? I'rabs. So in this way, Ibn Hajar rahmallah created the distinction between tashif and tahrif. However, Sheikh Ibrahim al-Lahim also then says here, he says, فَمَا ذَكَرَ ابن حجر من التفريق بين التصحيف والتحريف تفريق دقيق من العسير تطبيقه والذي يظهر أنه لم يلتزم تطبيقه في كتبه. That this it's so difficult to create this distinction and say that tashif refers to the change of dots and tahrif refers to the change of i'rabs. That scholars before Ibn Hajar would not do this. Ibn Hajar rahmallah himself was not careful to create the distinction, and scholars after him. So what you're learning here is basically just principles or basically just things in theory, but it's not actually in practice. In practice, whether there's a change in i'rab, whether it's a change in words, whatever kind of change, as long as it's not changing around the letters, you can consider it as tashif. It should not be changed or swapped around with maqlub. Ibn Hajar rahmallah now comments on it, and he says, وَمَعْرِفَةُ هَذَا النَّوْعُ مُهِمَّةٌ. That understanding this chapter is very important. He uses the singular هذا النوع. He didn't say النوعين, that tashif and tahrif. Why? Because he's referring to it as a subject, as a title. That ومعرفة هذا النوع المصحف والمحرف. So the title, the chapter name, al-Muṣahhaf and Muharraf, to understand both of them, it's very important. It's so important that scholars paid special attention to it and gave it undivided focus. أوقع العلماء في الاهتمام به. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah says, وقد صنف فيه العسكري. Alama Askari rahmallah, Hassan ibn Abdullah ibn Sa'ir al-Askari. He was born in the year 292 or 293, and he passed away at the age of 90 in 382. He wrote a kitab on it. It's called Tashifatul Muhaddithin. It's printed with a tahqiq of Sheikh Mahmoud Ahmad Mira. It's published by Matba'a al-Arabiya al-Haditha. So there's a PDF, so inshallah I'll put the link of the PDF in the notes. So the interesting thing is that he wrote a book on tashif, but the publisher himself made tasheef when typing the book. His book is about showing how muhaddithun made this distorted. But the publisher distorted his own book. So the book of tasheef is Muṣahhaf. He's trying to show how words were changed. In his own book, the words are changed. In fact, this here is an important challenge that we have in today's times. Sheikh Ibrahim al-Lahim says, وقد استفتح الأمر بوقوع التصحيف في الأسانيد والمتون في وقتنا هذا بسبب الطباعة ونشر الكتب دون تحقيق علمي. So in books of hadith also you will find there's a lot of tasheef. Obviously, if earlier scholars were making mistakes between muzahim, etc., here when you have people who don't know anything who are being paid to type out, they're not going to now break their heads to dissect whether that word is really muzahim or whether it should be a raw or zal. Whatever they can make out when typing it, that's what they will type out. So it's a big issue in today's times, and that's the whole thing which we always talk about, looking which prints to buy, etc. It's something looking at the muhaqqiq and looking at the publishers. It's a whole big subject which you can speak about 3 hours on it and give examples from different books, etc. A whole different subject of how they distort words when typing out. So that is the one book which Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned. In fact, this book, Tashifatul Muhaddithin, it was initially a very thick book, but then someone asked the author to separate it. So he had Tashifat which happens in the names of Muhaddithin, and he also had Tashif and Tahrif which takes place in normal in Arabic, so linguistic errors. But then someone told him to separate the two, so therefore it's another book now printed, شرح ما يقع فيه من التصحيف والتحريف, and that's printed separately. So that's the one book which Sheikh Ibn Hajar mentions. What Darqutni, Imam Darqutni rahmallah also wrote a book. The book of Imam Darqutni rahmallah is not found. Probably it's mafqud, or you can research and check whether it is in any of the museums. But to give you an idea on the contents, Imam Darqutni's is not specified to only hadith. It also incorporates qira'ah. So Imam Munawi rahmallah said that فائدة أورد الدارقطني في كتاب التصحيف كل تصحيف وقع للعلماء حتى في القراءات ومنه ما رواه أن عثمان بن أبي شيبة قرأ على أصحابه في التفسير جعل السفينة في رحل أخيه جعل السقاية. So these kind of differences, Imam Darqutni basically incorporated all of that in his book, but like we say, his book is not found. Ibn Hajar then indicates that there are other books as well. وغيره ما Allama Khattabi wrote a book, Ibn al-Jawzi wrote a book, likewise Allama Suyuti rahmallah, he wrote a Tashif fi Tahrif. There are many books which are written, and you refer to these books especially when you are reading Asanid, but also because this very next sentence will show you that the great impact which it has, it's when you're reading Mutun. So when reading Mutun, you don't, because a kitab have the i'rabs, so you don't just follow that, okay, because the book has those kind of i'rabs, so 100% those i'rabs are correct. At times you would need to research in these books and check up whether because like we said, it's, many times it's not it's not muhaqqiqin who are publishing the books. So أكثر ما يقع في المتون, most of the times when you have these kind of differences, it takes place in mutun. Now you remember in the chapters of Maqlub and Mustarib, Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned that those would take place more frequently in the chain. And then he showed that at times it seldomly takes place in the matan. But yeah, you say which one would be the best to invest in? So you see, when you now you're in 5th year, you don't invest in books like these books. If you got you just download whichever ones you can download and you use your money to buy. Inshallah, we'll discuss. You're going into final year, you rather keep your money for buying. I can tell you there's a huge difference between reading Sahih al-Bukhari without knowing the narrators and with reading Sahih al-Bukhari with reading with knowing the narrators. When you read Sahih al-Bukhari and you know every narrator, it's like your friends are telling you something. and then they are conveying to you the words. So you rather invest your money in books. I'll tell you later, inshallah, what books to buy. For now, you rather whatever, like this book of Alama Suyuti is also, there's a PDF for it, that book there's so many books to buy. So you have to choose wisely which books to buy. So for now, you don't have to invest in any of these books. You just download whichever books are available. So he's saying, وَأَكْثَرُ مَا يَقَعُ فِي الْمُتُونِ. So for now, if there's lockdown and you need to get a book, you get Al-Kashif and you start to memorize all the narrators. So he's saying, although there's a PDF, but now for those books, you obviously would need the hard copy of it. So وَأَكْثَرُ مَا يَقَعُ فِي الْمُتُونِ. So we are saying that most of the times it takes place in the matan. Now, when it takes place in the text, then that is where it causes huge changes. It causes like you can change the whole ruling. So the most harm it causes is when it takes place in the text, because it can change the ruling completely. For example, if you have to look, Mullah Liqari rahmallah gives the example that man sama Ramadan wa atba'ahu sittan min Shawwal. So it refers to keeping 6 fasts in the month of Shawwal. So he says that Abu Bakr as-Sawli, he made tasheef of it and he changed it to Shay'an min Shawwal. So Shay'an can be 1 day or 2 days. Likewise, another example which Munawi gives and also Ibn al-Hamali gave is ihtajama or ihtajara fil masjid. Now, that's going to change the ruling, whether it's cupping in a masjid. So you can see the last letter, is it a meme, or it's a slight circle you have to make and it's a meme. And if you don't make that slight circle, it becomes a raw. What a big difference it's going to make. Is it going to be أن المصطفى احتجر في المسجد اتخذ حجرة, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam made for him a small dedicated space, like a small room for him in the masjid? Or will it mean ihtajama, that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam done cupping in a masjid? The whole ruling can change and when it takes place in the matan. And this is where the importance of diraya comes as well. Besides just knowing about narrators, etc., it's also to have little bit faqahat. And in the Hanafi madhab, there's that whole path about the narrations of fuqaha and how it's a reason of tarjih, etc. And we have discussed all of that before. وقد يقع في الأسماء التي في الأسانيد, and we gave a lot of examples of this here. ولا يجوز تعمر تغيير الصورة المتن مطلقا. Intentionally, a person cannot create any of these differences. فقد عبر به جماعة من العلماء that many ulama, they tried to do this here. They tried to change. They tried to change wordings in the text of the Hadith. فُضِحَ بِهِ. They became this a grace. So people then started to even use terms on them and call them a sahfi, etc. So therefore, it's not permissible to do it. He says mutlaqan. So this here, sawa'un fil mufradat aw murakkabat, whether it is in individual words or whether it is in words. وَلَا الْإِخْتِصَارُ مِنْهُ بِالنَّقْصِ. Likewise, you cannot just condense or abridge a hadith. He's going to make one exclusion just now. So for general people, this is not permissible to condense or to abridge a hadith. So بِحَذْفِ بَعْضِهِ وَلَا إِبْدَالُ اللَّفْظِ الْمُرَادِفِ بِاللَّفْظِ الْمُرَادِفِ لَهُ. Or mentioning one word, swapping one word for another word. You think both words are synonyms, so you swap one word. إِلَّا لِعَالِمٍ بِمَدْلُولَاتِ الْأَلْفَاظِ. Except for that person who knows how the different words make an impact. So one person can't just decide. Imam Munawi gives the example. He says, like, for example, he gives the example from Quran. Like, if someone has to go and says, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. So now he made ikhtisar. He is not mentioning the entire context, but what the whole meaning. Another meaning is لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم لا تقربوا الصلاة. So you don't mention after that. So now you tell the person what meaning is going to take. Absolutely different meaning. So therefore, ikhtisar, etc. Likewise, using the word jalasa instead of the word qa'ada, etc. إلا لعالم بمدلولات الألفاظ. Why? because ذلك لتمكنه تمييز المحذوف من المثبت وتحقيق ذلك وما يحيل المعنى على الصحيح فيهما. He'll know how it alters the meaning, etc. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned على الصحيح في المسألتين. This shows that there is a difference on the siyam. So if a person knows, he knows the import of the meaning of the hadith, etc., then فيجوز للعارف مطلقا حتى عند من لم يجوز الرواية بالمعنى. You see later on, we're going to be doing a riwayah bil ma'na 2 paragraphs later. There's difference of opinion there. Some scholars did not regard it as permissible, but here scholars, even if they did not regard riwayah bil ma'na to be permissible, they would allow that a person can mention a portion of a hadith as long as he is arif. وأما غير العالم فلا يجوز له ذلك باتفاق العلماء. And if a person doesn't know, then there's consensus that it will not be permissible. Now, having explained all above, all this here what Ibn Hajar rahmallah said, although the are these dedicated words for altering the meaning, scholars at times they would just use words like akhta'a and yahimu, etc. They weren't very specific. So therefore, like I told you, that whether these are now baqa'id are really official terminologies, or whether because they were talking Arabic. So you know, sometimes when you're talking of in Arabic, you say he distorted it. At other times you can say he's making a mistake. At other times, so you're using different wording to denote upon the same thing. So you will find that many times they would use the words like yahimu, which we done before. They would use those kind of words. Now here quickly I want to conclude this year with a great lesson which we can take from this. Al-Imam Ibn Salah rahmallah mentions, وَأَمَّا التَّصْحِيفُ فَسَبِيلُ السَّلَامَةِ مِنْهُ الْأَخْذُ مِنْ أَفْوَاهِ أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ. That if you want to save yourself from tasheef, then you will have to take knowledge verbally from scholars who will mention it verbally. He says that وكان أخذه وتعلمه من بطون الكتب كان من شأنه التحريف. That those who only want to sit and learn from books, very frequent they will fall in these kind of errors. So alhamdulillah, that brings us to the end of the 15th lesson, and inshallah we'll take a break for 2 weeks and thereafter resume again. So the way it looks that inshallah we will complete this kitab by the end of this year inshallah. So we'll make like the next part also 15 lessons, and then the part after that also 15 lessons, and then from there we'll see. But inshallah before December, or in a worst case scenario, depending if you're going to take a longer holiday in December, then in January inshallah we will complete this kitab inshallah. So until we come back in 2 weeks time, and for Muqaddimah Ibn Salah, inshallah we'll continue tomorrow. So until then, jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.